Diary of a Man in Despair. Friedrich Reck. July 1936.
From Munich, now appearing almost foreign, from Prussian-occupied Munich, comes an amusing tale. It concerns Herr Esser, the Minister of Transport, who, in view of his known activities, should really be called the Minister of Sexual Transports. This Esser had an affair with the daughter of the owner of a tavern, and was so badly beaten by the father that he could neither go out nor, compromised as he was, remain in Munich. In accordance with the style of this regime, which has simply discarded decency as so much excess baggage, he was promoted shortly thereafter to a much higher post in Berlin. From there, he has just announced that traveling abroad by an individual has now become a thing of the past, and that henceforth a German can leave his country only as part of a herd, that a strength through joy organization. We have, therefore, every prospect of losing whatever remains of our freedom of movement, and of thus becoming completely the prisoners of this horde of vicious apes who 3 years ago seized power over us. I had a most enlightening talk recently with a man about the Nazis, and how they had come to power. He said that this so-called German Revolution is really based on simple blackmail. This is his story. Old Hindenburg had always been a poor man. He decided near the end to change that situation, and he had his son, Oscar, take over his business affairs. Oscar speculated on the stock exchange, and when the crash came suddenly, owed 13 million marks. To make this back, Oscar then let himself get involved in the Eastern Relief manipulations. I do not believe his father knew, and the Nazis found out in 1932. The fall of the Brüning cabinet is very likely connected. The Hitlerites got photostats of the incriminating documents, and from then on had the whip hand. Hindenburg had always before that kept Hitler away. He may well have said that I wouldn't make that Bohemian corporal postmaster, much less chancellor, as reported. But by the summer of 1932, he was no longer a free agent. Otherwise how could he, the chief of state, have said absolutely nothing when Hitler had the effrontery to send a telegram congratulating the Nazi murderers at Potempa? At the end of 1932, questions in the Reichstag about the Eastern Relief boondoggle began to touch on Hindenburg's Neudeck estate. The Hindenburg group began to be very worried. Then came the Berlin strike, to make the people in von Pappen's cabinet more amenable to the Nazi solution. Hitler felt that he could now press to be named chancellor. The story dovetails perfectly with information I have from other sources. Gregor Strasser, who was killed in the Rome Putsch, hinted something of the same thing to me in November 1932. This also explains the secret conferences at von Pappen's villa between the Hindenburg group and the Nazis. Frau von Schroeder acted as mediator at these talks, and von Papen, who had been trembling for the safety of his wife's fortune ever since the transport strike, played a strange role at them. And this explains, finally, the report, which keeps cropping up despite every denial, that von Schleicher, who was on the other side in this intrigue, had Oskar von Hindenburg arrested at the Friedrichstrasse railroad station and held overnight, following the break with the old president. General von Bredow, who was killed along with Schleicher in the Rome Putsch a year and a half later, reportedly was the arresting officer. So it seems that we owe the unutterable misery into which we have come to blackmail and to a financial lapse of Paul von Hindenburg. I am not in a position to be judge of a dead man. I consider that his lack of decision when the monarchy was threatened, on November 9, 1918, was treason to the crown. The story about his deathbed encounter with Hitler has given me a great deal of food for thought. Hindenburg refused to have Hitler come to his bedside. But Hitler was not to be put off that way, his prestige was at stake. He forced his way in, and got his blessing. Hindenburg had never forgiven himself for his betrayal of the Kaiser 16 years before. He evidently confused Hitler with the Kaiser, stroked his hand, and begged him to forgive him. If even a small part of all this is true, the truth, when it emerges, will shake the country. I am not concerned about the old man's image. Old Hindenburg simply was unable to measure up to the situation. I do not believe he was capable of doing anything wrong, with all his faculties. And it may well be that his slowness to react, during the First World War, often saved a battle that Ludendorff's wildly pragmatic maneuvering was about to lose. General Hoffmann was an aide, and his widow recently showed me a letter her husband had written her in the fall of 1914, just before the German advance through northern Poland. It read, "He, Hoffmann meant Hindenburg, spends most of the time hunting, gets back to headquarters at night, has next day's order read off to him, and says, 'Begad, fellas, I couldn't do any better myself.' Herr von Bethmann-Hollweg will be coming for a briefing on the strategic situation. We will have to tell the general what to think. He does not even know where his troops are stationed. I repeat, I am not going to judge a dead man. Hindenburg did not have the stature for the position he was given. He was also too old, and very likely too sick to handle it. But the stupidity of an entire people in agreeing to this combination of corruption and inadequacy in its leadership is something else again. The cabinet system is responsible, too. As long as this country agrees to that political institution, it will have to bear the confusion, convulsions, and political mayhem which accompany it. No, the Germans as they now are need a master. And by this I most certainly do not mean that forelocked gypsy type we have been given to lead us in our hour of need.